Hello everyone, this is Sweet Sour Gamer here, and I'm making a quick video to show you how to clean a graphics card. This was inspired by a Reddit post in the Overwatch Reddit of someone that was dealing with some interesting issues with Overwatch and its crashing, and one of the issues was brought up was graphics card overheating, which normally is caused by a dirty graphics card. So I figured, seeing as I've cleaned graphics cards before, that I'd make a quick tutorial video to kind of help people know how to do it without really being too nervous about it or, potentially ruining anything. So what you will need to start is any kind of PC hardware deals with Phillips screws. So there's 4 here that we're going to be dealing with. So usually a number 1 Phillips screwdriver or any kind of precision screws, just in case, or screwdrivers rather, may help you along the way. Because sometimes there are very small screws with some of these graphics cards. So this is one style of graphics card with its cooling system where it's covered with a large plastic body with the fan blowing through some air channels, as you can see here, and that's the heatsink down there. So the air channels are the, so the air is blowing through these lanes or channels from here. Now, so one of the issues with graphics cards overheating, as I mentioned, is dust and debris clogging up the heatsink. Now, typically, if you keep your card clean through compressed air cans, you don't really have to take apart your graphics card unless you want to replace your thermal paste, which we'll be doing later in this video. Typically, you don't have to do that for probably 6 to 12 months. But if you leave your graphics card for a long time without dusting it out, you run the risk of the dust and debris causing a blanket that will actually block or clog the channels. And I'm going to try and give you a better idea of what I'm talking about. So as you can see right in there at the top, you can see the channels that the fan's going to be blowing into. And you'll actually have a blanket of dust and debris that goes straight across it. So the air that's needed to cool the heatsink basically just doesn't go anywhere. And then this heatsink overheats, and the GPU itself will also overheat. So as I mentioned, this is one style. The other style is when the graphics card is overclocked by the manufacturer and they provide a more high-end cooling solution, or if you've provided or installed a custom one yourself. And this is my old card. It's a GTX 780 that was done by Gigabyte, and it has a custom cooling solution. So it's got a very big heatsink on it, and it's cooled by 3 fans. So this one is a bit more advanced in terms of taking apart, but it also runs less chance of the heatsink becoming clogged. Now, this is definitely an older graphics card, as you can tell from the pins. This is an AGP, which is a very old, obsolete technology that you'll never find anymore. But typically with the card that I just showed you, my GTX 780, the really big cards, those will also have the same housing, the same plastic housing. So we can pretty much use this as an example without too much issue. So as I mentioned, there's going to be 4 screws. These are the screws that are holding down the heatsink, or the GPU. So we're going to quickly just remove these 4 screws to begin. So the other thing to keep in mind while I'm doing this is the rate at which the dust and debris accumulates depends on the environment that the PC is in. So if you're a smoker, or if you have, and I should say cigarette smoke, or have pets, the rate at which the fur and the dust and debris will actually be a lot faster. So you may have to clean out your card more frequently to avoid any kind of buildup. Alright, so now that we have that off, this should come off. And sometimes it'll be fairly, it might stick, it might take some force, and that's because that's the thermal paste, as you can see there, that kind of creates a suction. So you'll just have to pry it off, but just make sure you're not missing any screws. So this is the power supply, or how the fan itself is getting power. So we can unplug that. We'll just set aside the circuitry or circuit board real quick. And now the plastic casing is actually being held down by these 4 small screws. So this is probably where the precision screwdrivers will come in handy. And you gotta make sure not to touch the some thermal paste. It's not an issue, it's just it can get messy. Alright, so those 4 screws are out. And now we have the heatsink. The fan and the heatsink. So these are the channels I was talking about. So the air is going to go straight through there, and because these thin blades, or the heatsink is consisting of thin blades, are easier to cool down. So we got to keep this right here clear. If that's blocked, then no air is going to get pushed through. Yeah, we got a little bit of dust on the fan, so you can use a brush. I typically use my camera brush. I'll grab that real quick. I'm sure it's probably similar to a makeup brush, but just something like this. So just kind of go through the fan blades. You can even go through the heatsink if you wanted to. But that's pretty much all there is to it. Once you have that nice and clean, we're ready to put it back together. However, there might be the need of taking the fan itself off, which isn't too difficult. Probably have to use the precision screwdriver again. But as you can see, the fan is being held down by further screws. So there's one there, but it's easy to get at just by turning the blade so you can get at the screws. So that's just if you need like more kind of flexibility with trying to get at the fan blades with the brush. But anyways, let's put this back on. Where'd my screwdriver go? Here we go. One rule of thumb is to put the screws in and don't tighten them fully until you have all the screws in. That way, if one of the holes isn't aligned, you can kind of move the hardware to line the holes, and then once you're done, keep touching the thermal paste. Alright, that is good to go. Now typically when you take something off that requires thermal paste, like a GPU or CPU heatsink, you'll want to apply new thermal paste, and typically by this time the thermal paste may have hardened, which has greatly reduced its effectiveness. And some of you may be wondering what thermal paste is or what it does, and basically what it does is, think of it like cartilage between your knee and the other bones that it's part of. And typically that helps transition the heat from the heatsink or from the GPU to the heatsink. So not having any thermal paste will greatly reduce the heat transfer, and your GPU will definitely overheat. So the easiest way to do it is apply it directly to the GPU. Let me get that back in vision. And it looks like I forgot to mention there's some little washers that came with the GPU or heatsink anchoring screws. We'll get back to that in a moment. So I typically just use toilet paper or paper towel to clean the excess thermal paste off. Try to get it nice and clean. Of course, if you put a little bit too much, it gets harder to clean. Now, I'm not going to do this for this video because I don't have any, but typically what you want to do to make it just extra clean is use Q-tips and rubbing alcohol to just make sure it's perfectly clean, because rubbing alcohol is probably one of the best solutions to clean computer hardware with, because A, it evaporates very quickly, so it reduces or has no risk of causing any kind of shorting like water would. And so you do it on the shiny part of the GPU, right about there, and just where the heatsink contacts the GPU. Just make it nice and clean so there's no excess thermal paste. So thermal paste will typically come in a syringe, and it also come with some kind of like spreader or spatula, or whatever you want to call it. And you don't need a lot. So we're going to get a nice close-up here. And seeing as this is a very small surface area, and like normally CPUs, they pretty much use the entire thing, and it's a much larger surface area, so you'll need a bit more. But typically, you just want to put a small amount. That's actually too much. But you want to use the spreader. Just give it a nice, even spread across the surface of the GPU. Actually, no, I think this might have been all right. Think of it like you're icing a cake. Yeah, that seems decent. So yeah, it's got a nice little coating on it. That's all you really need. So now we're ready to put the heatsink back on. So one thing to remember, I've done this so many times in the past when I was first starting out taking out laptops, is plug the fan in. Thankfully, it's a lot easier to plug the fan in on the graphics card. If you forget, with a laptop, you have to take it all apart again. So just line up the holes through the circuit board. There we go. Let's make sure you put the washers back on if there are any. Where'd my screwdriver go? There it is. So you want to do it in a crisscross fashion. So start in one corner and then go diagonally to the other corner. Let me show you again. So go from like this corner to this corner. It just helps even or distribute the, I'm not sure what to call it, I guess the weight or the compression across the GPU. Okay, and then it doesn't really matter which way you go from there. Go to one of the other corners. And then finally to the other corner. Oops. And then just kind of go over the same pattern you just went through, just to make sure everything's tight again. And there you go. You have a clean graphics card. Now, like I said, this is just the one type where you have the plastic assembly cooling system. So I'm just going to quickly go back to this one where it has a much more advanced cooling system on it. I'm not going to take it apart just because it's very advanced, but I'm going to try and give you an idea of what kind of screws you're looking for. This one actually took me a while to take apart, trying to find all the screws. And I'm going to have to try and remember what needed to take apart. So this definitely has a lot more screws underneath. I'm going to try and actually pick up the camera. So it's got the 4 for the CPU, or the GPU rather, but it also has a bunch over here. So you have one on the bottom, one in the mid, one on the top, and that just keeps the heatsink assembly anchored. And then you have some that are actually fairly hidden. Like there's one actually in here at the very end, right in there. That one surprised me the most. So you have to take a screwdriver and go all the way underneath. And I don't recall you had to take these screws out where the fan is. Yeah, so it's not too difficult. I think the one thing that, actually, you know what? No, never mind. That's not a screw that needs to be taken out. So yeah, it was just that one that's at the tip there that kind of threw me for a loop in terms of taking this apart. But as soon as you get it apart, it's pretty much the same thing. Just do your best. In this case, you benefit from compressed air to go through the channels because you can't really reach a brush all the way through. So do your best to clean it, put some new thermal paste on, put it back together, and you'll be good to go. If you have any questions, just reply to this video and I'll try my best to help you out. So thanks for watching, and I hope this helped someone. As long as it helped one person, I'm good. But anyways, thanks again for watching, and good luck.